Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. So let's talk about Impact Wrestling. Of course, it's been a hot minute. It's been a hot minute since we spoke about Impact Wrestling here on the channel. There's just been so much going on in the world of pro wrestling and just in the world recently. So we just haven't had a chance to talk about Impact. But the good thing is that there is tons to talk about today. I have a load of things I want to get into. The biggest, of course, is Braun Strowman. Quite literally, I suppose. Not just in terms of the news story, but in terms of physically, the biggest. One of the biggest guys if he does indeed sign with Impact Wrestling. But Braun Strowman is reportedly in talks with Impact Wrestling. Now, if you followed the channel previously, if you've seen any of the Impact Wrestling videos I've done on the channel before, you will know that this isn't really a massive story because we've covered it previously, but it's always nice to have a bit of an update. I know some people have been asking what's going on when it comes to Braun Strowman and Impact. Of course, Strowman can now legally sign with any company he wants to, appear on any pro wrestling program that he wishes. So what's the status when it comes to Braun Strowman? What's the status when it comes to Braun Strowman and Impact Wrestling? Seemingly because AEW's offered the table, they're not really interested. A return to WWE looks unlikely for Strowman right now. So what's going on when it comes to Braun Strowman? Well, Braun Strowman, Adam Scherr, Titan, as he might be known in Impact Wrestling, is reportedly in talks with Impact Wrestling. This is according to the most recent Wrestling Observer newsletter that was released last Friday. Now, Strowman has not yet put pen to paper, but the two sides are continually talking. Now, as I mentioned, Strowman officially became a free agent on August 31st. Strowman and Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President Scott D'Amore have both teased a possible appearance for the former WWE Universal Champion in Impact Wrestling. Now, Strowman's first post-WWE match looks to be on Friday, October 1st, when he goes against EC3 in the Free the Narrative 2 The Monster in Us All event. The show's trailer saw Strowman himself. He's teased by going as the name Titan in future appearances. As I mentioned, there had been rumors about him using the name Titan in Impact Wrestling. Now, as a note, he was previously announced for the Qatar Pro Wrestling Super Slam 3 show on February 26, 2022. He will travel to Qatar later this month to sign the contract with QPW chairman Ali Al-Marafi. Other names announced for QPW include EC3, Jon Moxley, Brian Cage, Sammy Guevara, Will Ospreay, and IWGP United States Heavyweight Champion Hiroshi Tanahashi. So the latest update when it comes to Strowman and Impact Wrestling is there isn't much of an update. They're still locked in talks and pen hasn't been put to paper. Now, when it came to Braun Strowman, if you've seen any of the stuff I've spoken about him on the channel here previously when it comes to Impact Wrestling, the hint was by Scott D'Amore, and again, I don't know how legitimate this was by Scott D'Amore. There was that Twitch stream maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whenever it was, when Scott D'Amore was at a baseball game and he's with some other Impact Wrestling people and he looked like he was a bit drunk during it and he was teasing lots of stuff. That's when he said Buddy Murphy's going to show up on Impact Wrestling on Thursday, and it didn't happen. Now, Murphy could still appear for Impact Wrestling in the near future. I think there's still lots of discussion that he might. I don't think an AEW run is off the table, but the general feeling is that Murphy, or Buddy Matthews, as his new name is in his post-WWE career, will end up with Impact Wrestling because he wants to take on more independent dates. So the rumor is that he will be headed to Impact. So that was teased by Scott D'Amore in that Twitch stream. But D'Amore also said in that Twitch stream that we were on the road to Braun for Glory. And that Braun Strowman, I guess, was going to be making his debut for Impact at Bound for Glory in October. And looking at it now, that probably does make more sense. We know how many episodes of Impact Wrestling are taped. We know that up to Victory Road, Impact Wrestling has taped television. Now, there obviously is a massive possibility that Strowman does indeed make his Impact Wrestling debut in the next set of television tapings right before Bound for Glory. That's a possibility, absolutely. But I think considering the buzz that those pay-per-views get, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure that the Bound for Glory pay-per-view gets as much hype as Slammiversary does, unless Impact start to lay the foundations for these teases. If they start teasing Braun Strowman, if they start teasing Buddy Matthews, then maybe we do get a bit of momentum. Because obviously, if you look at the pay-per-views that they've done this year, Impact Wrestling, I think they've done a very good job in promoting all of their pay-per-views, to be honest with you. And even Slammiversary, the hype to it, I wasn't totally on the level of, say, Rebellion earlier this year, but they've done a good job. They've done a good job, no doubt about that. If you look at the promotion that was going into Hard to Kill, there was a lot of excitement that Kenny Omega was going to have his first match earlier this year. Then obviously the promotion going into Rebellion when it was title versus title, AEW World Championship, Impact World Championship, Kenny Omega, Rich Swann, massive match, huge business for Impact Wrestling as well. The highest amount of pay-per-view buys that Impact Wrestling have done since Anthem purchased the company in 2017. Slammiversary, again, I wasn't massively sold on the build to it. I think that there could have been better main events and more hyped main events than Kenny Omega, Sami Callihan, but there's no doubt that the event delivered. I think there's no doubt about that whatsoever. The event totally delivered, and you had some great returns, some great surprises, and a tremendous main event, which featured Jay White showing up, which now in retrospect just feels really random, like Jay White just happened to be there, and I don't know if it planted the seeds for Jay White to eventually show back up. Maybe it might be a situation where it's Jay White versus maybe a Chris Bay at Bound for Glory, right? Chris Bay is in the Bullet Club, so maybe they could go in that direction there. I don't know, but that does feel kind of random. But we're just about a month or so away from Bound for Glory, and the promotion does feel very light, very, very light. I suppose we do have to get Victory Road out of the way, and that is going to be out of the way in the next couple of weeks. And maybe then, once we get to the next set of television tapings, maybe then we start to focus on Braun Strowman, Buddy Matthews, or the hints at least towards their imminent arrival. Then we can start to get a bit of buzz, a bit of excitement. But maybe Braun Strowman showing up at Bound for Glory is the best idea, because we saw what buzz Slammiversary had when those names showed up at the last live pay-per-view, when it was, again, Jay White showing up, etc. And maybe that's the same thing that they have to do for Bound for Glory, because Impact Wrestling, we know, the ratings are evidence of this, and we're going to talk about the ratings later on, but because they're in such a taped environment, and because they tape so many weeks of television ahead of time, and you know exactly what is going to happen, when it's going to happen, surprises don't exist in this taped environment, really, in terms of, week-to-week television, because you know what's going to happen. Maybe to generate the most buzz possible and generate the most impact possible, it's worth having Braun Strowman show up at Bound for Glory. And if a deal hasn't been worked out yet, if you're aiming for him to show up at Bound for Glory, you've given yourself quite a lot of time. You've given yourself at least another month. So I think these talks will be ongoing, because I think for Strowman, it's not, and for Impact, it's not a particularly simple deal to work out. Impact Wrestling, of course, is always, with most talents, very, very flexible about the deals they offer. They can just offer per appearance deals or handshake deals or no contracts at all. I think it'll be slightly different from Strowman. Of course, the pay is going to be substantially higher. It arguably would be, in terms of if he's just competing for Impact as his main US company, it would be one of the biggest signings that Impact have been able to pull off in, goodness, a very, very long time. Because again, we're talking about a guy that is a former Universal Champion. He did beat Goldberg, for what that's worth, last year. And he was, just a couple of years ago, a name that people were saying could be the next big thing in WWE, and he could be a top babyface champion and could carry the company. He was on a huge contract, over $1 million a year, because WWE thought there was so much value in him. Now, eventually they changed their minds on that value, and that's the reason he's no longer with the company. Nevertheless, if Impact are able to pick this guy up, it's still a significant signing for them. So I don't think it's a particularly simple deal. I think it would be a bit of a coup, let's face it, if they managed to pull it off, but I still think it will happen, but I think it will take time. Strowman also wants to focus on bodybuilding, acting, and I think the very, very light Impact schedule will lean into that too. And also, let's face it, if he comes in, you've got to really put the belt on him pretty quickly, because he's the guy to carry the company. Even if you might not like him, and you might not like his moves, or you might not like his character, or his personality, whatever you don't like about him, the name recognition that he will give to Impact is substantial. It's very substantial. So to have someone like that on the Impact Wrestling roster is a big deal. It's a really big deal. So I do think that Strowman will land in Impact. It looks like that's really the only destination for him right now. If the world was normal, I would say New Japan would be a real possibility, but it's not at the moment. That's the situation. And who's to say when he works out that Impact deal that there isn't a clause there saying that he can work for New Japan anyway? So we'll have to wait and see, but it looks more and more likely that he will show up in Impact Wrestling in the next month or so. I want to talk about Rich Swann. I know obviously the PWI 500 was revealed last week, and obviously Kenny Omega was the top of the list, and there was lots of discussion about Kenny Omega being number 1 and Roman Reigns being number 2, and whether or not that was right and all this kind of stuff. And I really don't like to I mean, I've said my piece on them anyway, those lists, and my piece kind of is that it doesn't matter. Lists are arbitrary, they're subjective, they're somebody's opinion. Everyone has different opinions. Obviously, people can agree on things. You can disagree on some things. That's what makes the channel here so great, is that we have opinions, and we can share our opinions. We can have different opinions, and that we listen to other people's opinions. We discuss, we debate, and we come to conclusions, or we agree to disagree. That's the great thing about pro wrestling. And the thing is with lists and rankings and star ratings and all that kind of stuff, it's subjective, which means in reality, it really doesn't matter. So I've said my piece about the top 2, but what I did want to single out was Rich Swann, who was ranked number 10 in the PWI 500. And I know, again, it's a list that some people will say, well, it doesn't really matter, and that's true. That is totally true. The thing I will say, though, is that I think it is quite representative of what a great year he had and what a great year Impact Wrestling had despite the pandemic, and I think that deserves to be credited. I think it's interesting, though, because I've said this a couple of times here on the channel. I've said this a couple of times, and I think it needs to be pointed out once again. Rich Swann, from, July of 2020, when he returned at Slammiversary, to around April of this year when he dropped the Impact World Championship to Kenny Omega, was obviously on the roll of his career. He was on the run of his career. He was doing the best work of his career. And I think the booking of him post-Rebellion has actually been quite shocking by Impact Wrestling, because this is the guy that the booking of him was so strong and the work he was doing was so strong that it resulted in him being ranked number 10 in the PWI 500. And make no mistake, Impact Wrestling isn't the biggest company in the world anymore, and there's some great names on that list. He was above some fantastic names on that list. Again, it's debatable what position he deserves to be in or what, but the fact that he was on that list goes to show what he did over the course of the last 12 months is very significant, which to me makes it all the more alarming, shall we say. He's just dropping straight down the card once again. And I get it. Once you drop the championship, you can't be in the main event the whole time. That's true. But there is just something about it that I see that, he dropped the title to Omega, then he's losing to W. Morrissey, which, again, I think you're putting over W. Morrissey. I get it. But then he's, losing other matches, and now he's in a tag team with Willie Mack. And it's not as if they're bad spots, but it's evidence that you had something here, and you still do have something here with Rich Swann as the underdog babyface champion. I get it. Again, you can't be in the main event picture all the time. You can still book him strong. It's kind of the Kofi Kingston effect, isn't it? Kofi Kingston was WWE champion for like 6 months. During that 6-month period, he never lost a match. He pretty much won every single match. He then lost to Brock Lesnar, and he just sort of disappeared. He went back into a tag team wrestler, and that was it once again. And it's kind of been a bit similar with Rich Swann. He lost the title, and he's just kind of gone back into mid-card mediocrity. And when this list came out, it kind of just reminded me of that of, man, he was really over at one point, really over. And I don't know if because there wasn't a crowd present when all of this was happening, or that they moved on to focusing on Kenny Omega and Don Callis and that whole storyline, that they kind of forgot about Rich Swann and the great work that they were doing. And I think it speaks volumes to that. And that's something that I did want to pick out. I wanted to pick out one. Obviously, congratulations to Rich Swann and Impact for having a name ranked so high, especially, again, in there with some really big names. But also, it does go to show, doesn't it, of how far he's kind of dropped since then. And I can't really figure out why. I know at one point his contract was expiring, but the fact he's still with Impact now would at least imply that either an extension was worked out, a deal was worked out, or maybe he signed a new deal. I don't know. But it does seem very strange to me, and it does sort of point out that, man, they maybe shouldn't have stopped pushing that guy. And not to say that they're not pushing him anymore, but it does feel a little bit amiss, doesn't it? It does feel a little bit amiss. I wanted to talk about Tessa Blanchard. Now, I never know when to sort of fit her in or what topics to, because we do daily videos talking about WWE and AEW and Impact, and the fact that she is a former Impact World Champion, to me, probably makes the most sense to talk about her in these Impact videos. So there was a story going around last week that neither WWE or Elite Wrestling, or All Elite Wrestling rather, reportedly have any interest in working with or signing Tessa Blanchard. Now, there were rumors circulating in the lead up to AEW All Out a couple of weeks ago that Blanchard could be a surprise entrant in the Women's Casino Battle Royale. Obviously it wasn't. Ruby Soho was that name. Apparently a small section of the live crowd in Chicago could be heard chanting, "We want Tessa," To which the rest of the audience responded, "No, we don't," which is certainly interesting. With Blanchard's name once again in the conversation for being a potential signing for one of wrestling's major promotions, Cassidy Haynes of BodySlam.net, who of course just have major sources in AEW, is reporting there are no plans for her to work with AEW or WWE for that matter, either on the main roster or in NXT. The report cites one source who said, quote, "She's nuclear, nobody wants near her." And the report goes on to say that the only wrestling promotion to hold talks with Blanchard since she left Impact Wrestling last year has been the NWA. Of course, Blanchard's contract with Impact Wrestling was ripped up in June 2020. Of course, her contract was set to expire the following month after she opted to take a leave of absence during the COVID-19 pandemic. The then Impact World Champion, the company stripped her of the title and terminated her deal just a few days before it was due to expire anyway. Now, obviously, Blanchard does have a checkered past and is accused of making racist remarks and also bullying behavior that raised its head once again prior to her winning the Impact World Championship in 2020, although she has, of course, denied all of these allegations. So it's kind of like the bi-monthly, I guess, Tessa Blanchard update that people will say, when is she eventually going to sign with any company? I think that AEW, every time I've heard her and AEW be brought up, I just don't see it happening because I think AEW really does care a lot about perception, about PR. They don't like negative stories about them or bringing in people with a checkered past. If anything, it was kind of surprising, the whole Eva Lise situation when they brought her in, because again, she does have not allegations or anything as serious as Tessa Blanchard, but she has stories that she's difficult to work with and stuff like that in the past, and that of course raised its head once again in Impact, and she didn't in Impact in AEW rather, and that didn't last very long. As far as where she goes, I've always said I think it would be more likely in a major company it would be WWE, because I don't think they care that much about negative PR. We've seen that this year alone, so I don't think they necessarily care that much. But right now, it's just, the issue isn't it, is that any company that signs her, those stories will come back up. Now, I think that somewhere like the NWA might have been the best place for her, purely because I think she's maybe holding out hope that she will land in a WWE or an AEW, but that's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen because of those issues. If she wants to work her way back into the industry, it would have to be in an NWA, an MLW, a Ring of Honor, maybe even coming back to Impact. But I think given the way it ended, I don't think Impact has any desire to work with her again, to be honest with you. So I don't know if there's a way back with Tessa for Impact or for any company for that matter. And I don't blame them. We live in this reality right now where, again, PR is PR and media is media, and you can't run away from those allegations forever. She can deny them all she wants, but there's going to be more stories and more people coming out saying, I was there, I saw it, I was a victim of it. And that's what she has to deal with. I want to talk about 2point0 from AEW, because All Elite Wrestling's Jeff Parker and Matt Lee have revealed that Impact Wrestling offered them a contract following their respective releases from WWE earlier this year. Now, Parker and Lee departed WWE NXT in June after several years with the promotion and showed up in AEW just 2 months later, aligning with AEW wrestler Daniel Garcia. Now, as a trio, the group have enjoyed frequent confrontations with the likes of CM Punk, Sting, Darby Allin, Jon Moxley, and Eddie Kingston, including facing Sting and Allin in a tag team match on Dynamite a couple of weeks ago. 2point0 have now revealed that their path could have been very, very different, however, after Impact Wrestling put a deal for them not long after they left WWE. Speaking on their YouTube channel, Lee confirmed that a deal was offered, saying, quote, "Did Impact offer us a contract? There was a deal on the table." Parker followed with, "There were some talks. We had talks all over the place. Free agency was actually a lot of fun. It's scary at first, but it was a lot of fun." I mentioned previously, I think if you can go back and I think it was a live stream. I did a live stream when these names were getting released back in June, and when at the time Everrise was released by the company, by WWE, I felt that Impact would be a really good home for them. I think that the Impact Wrestling tag team division has suffered quite a lot over the course of the last 12 months. With obviously the departure of Ethan Page to the North split up. Obviously that's been the best for Josh Alexander. He's thriving right now. But also you have to look at the splitting up, or just Alex Shelley not being able to be a regular wrestler for Impact. So the Motor City Machine Gun split up, and those names it's a big deal losing those names, right? So I think that they would have been a fantastic addition. I think they could have easily been Impact Tag Team Champions, even though that kind of spot's just reserved for the Good Brothers at this point, isn't it? So I guess that's not possible. But I did say at the time that I could see him going to AEW because, again, I think they fit there. I think I could see them fitting in being the elite and that kind of atmosphere. And it's exactly what they've done. And I think they've been tremendous. And I think really the sky's the limit for them. I think they are the prototypical perfect sort of heel heater tag team in the sense of, like, if you've got a star and they can be your backup. I don't know if Daniel Garcia necessarily is that star, but if you've got that star, they can be the guys that just take the beating. Just keep taking the beating because you just want to beat them up. And it's a case of almost they can't beat anyone up, but they can get beaten up, and they can get beaten up very, very well. So I'm a big fan of 2point0, and I think they would have done great in Impact, but I also think they're doing great in AEW too. I want to talk about the Impact ratings briefly because, as again, I feel like I'm always talking about this at the moment when I talk about Impact Wrestling, but the Impact Wrestling viewership and key demo rating was down from last week with the continued build to Victory Road. Thursday's new edition of Impact Wrestling drew 111,000 viewers on Access TV, according to Nielsen via Showbuzz Daily. This is down nearly 12% from last week's 126,000 viewers. Thursday's episode drew a 0.03 rating in the 18 to 49 demographic. This is down 25% from last week's 0.04 key demo rating. Now, of course, when we're talking about such small numbers, any drop is going to be quite high in terms of percentages. Last week's episode of Impact ranked 125 in the cable top 150 for the key demo. This was actually up from last week's 129 ranking. Impact ranked 135 for the night in terms of cable viewership, which was also up from the previous week's 139 viewership ranking. Again, it's kind of a situation of, when we talk about the Impact Wrestling ratings at this point, I mentioned before that they need a refresh in terms of setting, even though they've just got the crowds back. I think they will do that when they have the Vegas Bound for Glory, which we'll touch on in a second. I think that will help. If they could go live at least once every couple of weeks, it would really, really help them. I don't see any plans for that in the future. There just feels like at the moment with all this stuff going on, whether it's AEW or even the negative stuff with WWE, Impact just isn't the focus anymore. It's just not the focus anymore, and there isn't something that is really grabbing people's attention anymore. And it just feels a bit stale, doesn't it? I mean, the crowd's good, but the crowd are tired as well, and I don't know. There just feels to be something a bit missing, doesn't there? And I don't know necessarily what that is. I do think spoilers, as I mentioned, play a massive part because the viewers that tune in every week to Impact on Access TV, they're smart viewers because there's so little of them. So they're smart viewers, and I think the spoilers play a part in it. I think that this whole YouTube thing that's going on as well plays a part in it as well, takes viewers away from Access TV. I do think that the product, as I mentioned time and time again, the product's good. The product's always been good. For a while, the product's been good. If they could get it on a bigger cable network, now it's not going to be a cable network the size of the USA Network or TNT or anything like that, nothing even close to that. But if they could get it on something a bit bigger, then I do think viewers would tune in. But until they do that, they're always going to be stuck. They're always going to be stuck around this number. You know, unfortunately, earlier this year it was a much higher number. It was closer to 200,000. Now it's closer to 100,000. So through the year, how, why? Because maybe spoilers, the return of fans, or Kenny Omega and his reign, or Christian Cage and his reign, whatever it may be, they've managed to lose about half their viewers, which is significant. And obviously, something needs to change. What that is, time will only tell. Finally, we have an update when it comes to Bound for Glory this year. Impact Wrestling's 2021 Bound for Glory pay-per-view has been announced for Sam's Town Live in Las Vegas, Nevada. The event will be held on Saturday, October 23rd. It was previously announced that Bound for Glory would be held in Vegas with a special start time of 10 p.m. Eastern instead of the usual 8 p.m. It was believed that the start time change had to do with AEW Dynamite airing on Saturday that week due to the NHL playoffs airing on TNT. Fans will be able now to tune into Dynamite at 8 p.m. Eastern, then Bound for Glory at 10, but we'll talk about that in a second. The reason was confirmed by Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President Scott D'Amore in a press release sent out. Impact Wrestling just announced this morning that they will return to Sam's Town for the pay-per-view. Sam's Town Live is the venue that Impact and Ring of Honor usually run when they're in Las Vegas. Impact will also run Sam's Town for TV tapings that week, to be held on Sunday, October 24 and Monday, October 25, which again, hopefully when we're talking about ratings, can give a different vibe, a different feel, a different setup. Whether or not that happens, time will only tell. As I mentioned before, when it comes to that start time, that is basically all to do with the Saturday Night Dynamite that's going on. As I mentioned, Impact Wrestling has announced a special start time for the next pay-per-view event, Bound for Glory. The event will begin at 10 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, October 23rd. This is because on that same night, AEW is hosting a special edition of Dynamite in Orlando, Florida. The reason for this particular air date is due to the Philadelphia Flyers versus Boston Bruins NHL hockey game, I sound like I'm Canadian, airing on TNT the Wednesday before on October 20th. Impact has extended an open invite to stars from AEW, New Japan, and AAA to come and join in their event. How many stars from AEW will come, considering Dynamite's on the same night, time will only tell. But it's the right idea. There's no point airing at the same time because, again, people just won't watch. So the idea of maybe trying to use Dynamite as a bit of a lead-in, I think might help, but fans might be tired anyway. It'll be difficult. But look, they can try their best, and I think we're going to really start to see the build to Bound for Glory coming in the next couple of weeks. And maybe, again, they should rename it Braun for Glory because it could feature the debut of Braun Strowman or Titan in Impact Wrestling. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these Impact Wrestling news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, AEW, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go the rankings, and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.